It was back to school, well, back to college, to meet a group of 17-year-old students. And because we're in a college, the first question had to be, hands up, who's going to uni? And I see your hand is not up. What are you doing instead?
I'm planning to do an apprenticeship after college. It's mostly a personal preference because I'd like to go straight into employability and into a career, earning and learning at the same time. And I think there's that hands-on experience at an early age that's really important. I can really fast forward your experience and your career.
I mean, at the moment it's not fantastic for people of our age, but I feel it's getting better because there's a bit more of a push this time than in previous generations. We're actually getting younger voices heard, and there's various parties who are trying to appeal to younger generations.
There's a real broad apathy towards young people, and the government doesn't even want to try to know what's going on, let alone understand.
I think there's also been a lot of current events recently that have not stacked the odds in our favour, like we've had the COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis, and also we're facing the aftermath of Brexit still, whilst also looking at things like the Ukraine war and how that's affecting fuel prices and food prices, and there's this kind of mass inflation that we're facing at the moment, which is making everything cost a lot more. So I think that's definitely something to consider for the younger generation. We're still looking at these economic issues now going into the future that could have an even bigger impact.
Does anybody even think they will own their own house? No.
Realistically, the only chance I'm going to have of owning a house is if I inherit it from my parents. Because after so many things have happened, the effects of right to buy, the crash, so many things, there just isn't a chance of me being able to own a house easily.
And then there's the cost of just getting about.
I just passed my test and I live in a really quiet area. The closest buses get you to the next town, which doesn't have much else public transport. So for me it wasn't, though it was a big thing when it came to how much they would cost, it was something that I had to do to be able to get around. And I get the train to college and my ticket for the whole year has cost me over £1,000.
Transport for younger people, as many people have said here, it's not good, and some places it just doesn't exist, and even still then it's expensive, and it's it's not helpful if it's expensive because then it's not accessible.
And how do you get to college?
I take a bus.
And how's that?
It's expensive. It's £600 a year, which isn't too bad, but also it doesn't run at very good frequencies. It's twice a day, which is hard when I live the other side of the city, so there's no other way to get there.
So does the political system work for you?
I guess there's always room for improvement, but I don't think, for me personally, it's not the worst political system in the world. I think it does work generally.
I really disagree because, folks are 16. There are 2 years worth of people who have very similar rights to people over the age of 18 and yet don't have the right to vote. We're not being listened to and we don't have the right to be listened to.
I think especially now, young people are getting increasingly politically aware more than anything, and I think that we'd all appreciate being able to vote and actually be able to action that political awareness.
Would you have party allegiance, or is it based on policy for you?
It's definitely more based on policy. So I feel the whole idea of party loyalty is a bit stupid. And I would definitely be willing to change who I would support based off of a really important issue. If it was a lesser one, maybe not so.
I think because of the first past the post system that we have, it's sometimes hard to vote just based on policy, because realistically it only ever seems to be Labour or Conservative that do get into power. So I think you have to think quite tactically about who you vote for, especially based on the area you live in. For example, I'm very interested in environmental policy, but a Green Party MP would never win in my constituency because it's always a Conservative area, so you have to vote tactically.
Being loyal to one party is quite dangerous because you can kind of turn a blind eye to what their policy changes are, because if you've always voted that way, you've always voted that way. And I think you should be driven by policy because policies change, times change. It's important to stay up to date, and if it's a party loyalty within family as well, that can become quite dangerous because obviously you're very influenced by your family and what they think. So I think you should always sort of vote rather by policy than rather by loyalty.